Welcome to the Nobody Guide to Life, where we provide tips and tools for personal growth, personal development, and your spiritual journey that you can use right now in your everyday life. I'm J.A. Plosker. Thank you for joining us. You can find out more at thenobodyguidetolife.com, or you can check us out at Twitter and Facebook at Nobody's View. You can also join the Simple Spirituality group on Facebook. If you like what you hear, we'd welcome a subscription or a review. We'd appreciate it. So we hear so much today in the media about what others say and do and believe. But do you believe everything you hear? When it comes to the arena of world religion, there's a lot of information out there, and I've studied world religion, and as someone who's done that, I hope you research what you hear. I hope you talk to people personally about their beliefs instead of making assumptions. If you listen to the show, you know that I believe there is much in ancient wisdom that can help us right now in modern everyday life. And part of appreciating that wisdom is doing what we can to learn about it and to respect it. My guest today plays an important role on that road to respect. Robyn Lebron is an author, speaker, and award-winning member of the Religion Communicators Council. Her mission is to promote interfaith education and harmony, and her books serve that mission, as does her website, interfaiththrougheducation.com. Now, Robyn lives in the woods of the Midwest, and she told me her signal for recording the show may not be the best, so she's outside in an effort to make the connection a bit better. She has the wind and her dogs joining, and that's just great. Her message is important, and I said, let's do it, and I hope that you listeners will go with it, and that's the spirit of the show. So welcome to the show, Robyn.
Thank you so much for having me. I'm thrilled to be here.
It's great to have you. So can you talk to us about your road to interfaith dialogue? That's such an interesting area for people to pursue and really commit their lives to. So what brought you to that road of interfaith dialogue?
Well, I grew up, the terminology is Air Force brat. My dad was in the Air Force, and I traveled around all over, and I met people of every race, color, creed, religion. Obviously, in a childlike fashion, they were all friends, I mean, you didn't ask them what their religion was or anything. You just loved them for who they were. And so I sort of had that background to begin with. And I went through my personal search through various denominations, Christian denominations, and I ended up kind of being turned off by organized religion because there were so many people that didn't walk the walk. And so I got into a personal walk with who I call God, the supreme being or whatever you want to call it. And interestingly enough, I think God has a sense of humor because he ended up making me fall in love and marry an Episcopal priest, obviously very deep into organized religion. And I thought, oh my gosh, what am I doing here? So yeah, for 12 years, it was an eye-opening experience. I did learn some things about myself, but one of the things I wanted to do was open the eyes and the hearts and the minds of our congregation. So I started teaching classes on different religions and faith practices. It was like an adult education course, and we did one religion every couple weeks for 2 years. And at the end, they said, oh my gosh, this was just so interesting. And I learned so much that I didn't know. And so they kind of convinced me I needed to publish it, which is, how the books ended up getting started. Interfaith Professionals, the group that I manage on LinkedIn, kind of dropped in my lap. I joined it, and the creator just kind of messaged me one day and said, oh, I like what you say, and I really need you to take over this job because I don't have time. So it just kind of happened. It evolved, and now I feel like my calling is just to try and facilitate connections and to kind of open people's minds and hearts to other thoughts and understanding and effort towards peaceful discourse and learning to disagree in an agreeable fashion. I mean, that's one of my famous statements on LinkedIn. Let's disagree in an agreeable fashion. We don't have to believe everything the same, but we can still be loving and caring and, accepting.
Right. Now, for those listening, you've been hearing Robyn mention a LinkedIn group. So she does have a professional and interfaith dialogue group on LinkedIn. And Robyn, how have you found people's response to that to be? Have you found that group to be something that people are respectful of? Do you find that there's some pushback in that? Do you find that there's argument in that, or more constructive dialogue?
Well, when I started 5 years ago and I had this job dumped in my lap, there was definitely some contention. There was a couple people that were not really there to communicate and learn about other faith practices. They were there to, kind of tell us that we needed to change our ways or else. And so, yeah, we had some issues. People that I had to constantly remind why they were there and what our group rules were, and a couple I actually had to block because they just refused to cooperate with the spirit of the group. And the reception has been really good. We have everything from atheists, pagans, obviously the big three, they call it, and on down. But unfortunately, since LinkedIn changed their format when Microsoft purchased it, it's been a little bit more difficult to keep up with discussions. And I'm disappointed about that because we had some really vibrant discussions going. And there are still some people that take part. But out of 4,700 members, there's probably 50 that are involved.
What issues and conversations stand out the most here? What are people most interested right now, in your opinion?
Well, because of, the recent history in the U.S., there's a lot of conversations about Islam. Is it really a religion of peace? And we have a couple just wonderful members that are continually trying to help educate and quote scriptures from the Quran and explain, that the extremists are not practicing Islam the way it should be practiced. I think that's always a discussion that people find interesting and intriguing because there's so much negative press, that they're searching for peaceful answers. I mean, I think people want peace, truly. So that's probably one of the biggest conversations. I think the other one would be the sort of opposite end, which would be like the extreme conservative evangelical Christians and all that sort of thing will come up too. And so people are looking for answers to these horrible stories they hear on the media all the time. I think they're actually searching for, well, this can't be true. There's got to be another side to this.
When you look at your own personal history with religion and spiritual values, and you reflect back on your life, how do you see all these diverse religious values coming together in your life to help you on your search? How does that look to you?
Well, as I was doing my research, I thought I knew a lot,
Right.
but I learned how much I didn't know. And I began to realize that the golden rule or some variation of that runs as a common thread through every single faith practice, including humanism and atheism. And the basic premise of caring for the elderly or the children or reaching out to somebody who's hungry or, those are there. They're there in every single faith practice, including the traditional African religion, which is 50,000 years old. Those are all there. And I firmly believe without a speck of doubt that the Supreme Being, the Great Spirit, God, whatever you want to call him, her, has been speaking to humankind since the beginning. I mean, he's been sending messages, and different messengers in different parts of the world have received this message and shared it in their geographic regions. But the message is the same, It's the rituals and the dress style and the, type of worship practices that are different, but not the message. And I did learn some things about myself and my own spiritual path that I kind of absorbed, even though I was raised Christian and was Christian my whole life and actually ended up getting baptized in 2 different churches. Once as an infant and then once later when I was older. I picked up some thoughts and very strong spiritual rightness, if you want to call it, from some Eastern religions, and one of the ones that particularly grabbed me was the religion of Spiritism. And I am now a Christian who believes in reincarnation. So, some Christians would say, oh my gosh, how could you? Right. But it is what it is. We grow based on our personal experiences and our prayers and our thoughts, and that's what I believe.
Tell us a little bit about how your calendar looks, because I hear your story and I hear about all the different things that you've studied, and there's this idea of eclecticism out there about how we can choose the philosophies and things that interest us from these traditions and put them to work for us in modern times. Talk to me a little bit about how your calendar looks, how you celebrate traditions through the year, how you encourage others to do that through this eclectic viewpoint that you have.
Well, I love Christmas, always have. It's just one of my favorite times of year. And, even people that somehow misbehave learn to be peaceful and nice at Christmas time. So I love that. It's still my favorite holiday. I am not into organized religion at all anymore. I have a very strong personal relationship with my God, and I live out in the middle of the woods. And so I literally can sit on my deck and listen to the wind blow and have a conversation with God. And as far as my eclectic beliefs, I think part of my evolution has been to realize how minute this life really is, and how every struggle and every trial and every hardship is such a small part of my eternal existence that I no longer am drawn to the sort of physical trappings of organized religion. They just don't do it for me. I don't think that that's what faith is supposed to be about. It's supposed to be about reaching out for each other and loving one another and helping one another and connecting people that need something. And I think that's what I'm called to do now, is just to help people connect with information or another individual that might help them, or they may be searching for something and I happen to know of someone who does this particular thing. And so that's what I do now.
You said something that was really interesting about talking about how minute life is. And, sometimes we get into these discussions of spirituality, and someone will always talk about the idea of close your eyes and picture yourself in this room. Now picture yourself in this house, in this neighborhood, in this country, on this planet. And you keep going out and out and out until you can't even see yourself. It's just a speck. How do you help people talk about that? Because sometimes when you're sitting in a problem and you're leaning on faith, it's hard to see minutia in the midst of a problem that seems so big. How do you help people frame those issues so that they can kind of find that balance between what seems so big and what seems so minute? How does that look for you?
One of the first, this is sort of more of a quick response. If someone is, deeper minded, then, my response would be slightly different. But my first response is, in the overall spectrum of world peace, how big a deal is this? When they think about it and think, well, I guess, I got in a car accident, but it's in the overall spectrum of world peace, it's really not that big of a deal, So it kind of like rattles their cage a little bit and has them sort of put what they're going through in a little bit of perspective. And then if somebody wants, needs, maybe they're really more distressed and that little one-liner is just not going to do it for them, then I basically talk to them about, obviously you want to find out what their faith is. Do they believe in life after? Because if they don't, then it's more difficult. They don't realize that, that this life is actually just kind of a schoolyard for what's next. So that is definitely challenging to help people that aren't totally comfortable with the idea that there is more than this. And so then their trials just seem like that's all there is. This is my life right now, right here. And then with that person, you almost have to say, well, your child could be dying of cancer right now. Which trial would you rather have? I mean, it's kind of a reality check. Again, you try and find something that is worse than what they are going through and say, yes, this is really terrible. I feel bad that you wrecked your car, but it's insured. And thank heavens your child wasn't in the car and wasn't killed. Again, this isn't going to help everybody. It depends on their mental attitude and how strong they are spiritually to begin with. One of the ways that the faith practice of Spiritism really strengthened me is I had some real tough times in my life for various reasons. And the Spiritists, it's almost like a cross between Christianity and Eastern religions. It's the most fascinating faith practice. But they believe that our trials are actually gifts. And that if we accept them as a gift in terms of what this trial is going to give us spiritually, our spiritual growth, our wisdom, our humility, our compassion, all the things that you gain when you walk down a troubled path, you come out the other side a different person. And that if you accept that as, okay, well, this is something I have to learn and it's going to be good for me. And I guess thanks for the gift, God.
Right.
And that has helped me tremendously to remember that the trial is going to be for my good. And that makes it a little bit more palatable. Like someone who's going through medical school, it's horrible. It's hours and hours and studying and money and internships in the middle of the night. But it's a means to an end. And our earthly trials are very much like that.
Yeah, that's so interesting, Robyn, because we've talked sometimes on this show, we talked a few episodes ago about reframing. And what you're really bringing up for people is something so important. And it's the intersections we have between world religion, personal spirituality, psychology. We forget that a lot of these faith systems are really talking about psychology in a lot of ways. And the tools of faith help us to reframe suffering. I have a teacher who always mentioned in ancient teaching, and you just said it, that this too is for the good. And he describes someone who believed that and stated that their whole life, and miracles would follow that person because they believed that everything that happened to them was for the good. And it doesn't minimize suffering. And that's an important point, is I don't think for our listeners, I don't think Robyn is minimizing suffering. I think what we're doing is raising it up to the light and examining it in new lights so that we can see what it can bring us, how we can learn from it.
Yes, and unfortunately, sometimes when you're in the midst of the trial, you're not learning anything. You're so busy putting one foot in front of the other, and you're trying to take a positive outlook and saying, okay, so this is a path I'm supposed to walk. This is going to be for my own good. I know it is. You can tell yourself all those things, but you don't actually have that aha moment until after it's done. And then you realize, I really did grow from this. I learned this, or I learned that, or, whatever it was that you were meant to learn from this experience. And so I would say to the listeners, don't assume that you're going to know immediately when you start your trial what the trial is for. Just take it with faith and say, this is going to make me a better human being in some way.
Right. So talk to me a little bit about your books then, because we've taken this journey with you and we know a little bit about you. And then I want to know more about how those books you wrote add to this overall dialogue that we've been having about world religion and spirituality. What was your intent with those books? What do they say to us?
Well, the intent in my mind was to teach people about other faith practices so that they could stop thinking of other people as less than, so they would grow in understanding and in truth and start thinking, wow, that I didn't know that voodoo was such a beautiful faith practice and it has nothing to do with voodoo dolls, Right. So it started out as an educational process. And during my research, I was spiritually touched and changed. I hope that would be the case with people that read the books. And just for clarification, the first book, Searching for Spiritual Unity. That was my first publication in 2012. And it's all 40 religions in one book. And it was so big. It was close to 900 pages and, kind of expensive for the average person. And I sold some, but, the average person isn't going to invest $40 in a book if they haven't been told to by somebody they trust, And so I've been doing some soul searching, and I want to get this information in people's hands. And I don't really care if I make any money. That's not the whole point of it. So I had it republished in a 2-volume set. And I told the publisher, I said, I want the volumes to be less than $20, and I don't care how much profit I make. So the second book is actually, each volume has 20 different religions and faith practices. Both are a combination of, unusual religions and practices and some basic Christian denominations. So if a person only wanted to spend $20 and they only bought one, they would be touched in some way. At least that's my hope, that they would start to experience the change that I experienced as I was doing the research. The 2015 is updated, of course. There was some changes in some of the various churches, and the membership numbers were updated and things like that. So that set is the most current. And that is the one that actually won the DeRose Hinkhouse Award for Best in Class for Adult Books in Religious Communication. So I'm just thrilled to death with the way they turned out. I love the covers, and I just hope that people will be drawn to learning about these other practices, because they're just so beautiful. I mean, really, it's just like when I was doing the research, many times I think, wow, that is really cool. I wish Christianity did that, So, so that's what I hope. I hope that they'll touch people. And I used to get all worried about, well, I haven't sold a gazillion. I mean, I have a 5-star rating on my original book that came out in 2012, but I don't have as many reviews on the new books yet. But I had to decide, you know what? In the overall spectrum of world peace,
right.
It doesn't matter how many I sell.
Right.
If I touch 2 lives, then I've done a good job.
Right. And Robyn, in this day and age, with all the dialogue that's going on, that's so important. One person is the world. One person really is the world. So with all of this that you have, with all of this in your background, what's a tip or tool that you can offer our listeners that they can use right now, right when this podcast ends? What's something that you can provide that our listeners can use on their journeys of personal and spiritual growth?
Well, I mean, I talked about some, which would be accepting your trial as a gift to help you grow. I think that's really important, that anytime you're going through a difficult time to, kind of embrace that concept. And I'm not saying that I always did the second the trial started. I mean, I would go through my throwing the rocks, why me? Oh my gosh, I can't take another trial. And, the sort of pissing and moaning people go through. But I always kind of shook the dust off and said, okay, I'm ready now. After you have your little complaint, then you move into the next stage and say, okay, this is going to do something good for me, and I accept this, and I'll do it. And I think it's made such a world of difference in my peace of mind. Just to know and take everything with a sense of peace that it's going to be okay. And I think that's probably the most important thing that people can learn is that the old saying, this too shall pass. It's not permanent. And when you come out the other side, you're going to be a changed person.
Right. And we don't always know what the gift is until we unwrap it. And I think that's the importance of reframing and keeping a little perspective. So thank you for reminding us of that. So I want to take this opportunity to thank Robyn for her time and insights. So thank you so much, Robyn, for being on the show with us today.
It was a pleasure.
And to all of you out
so.
there, seek out your own information. I have to emphasize that. Explore. The world's religious traditions are filled with wisdom, philosophy, insights. There's so much more than what you hear about in the news. There's so much more to share. There's so many ways to express spirituality. Don't be afraid to talk to people. Reach out to people like Robyn. See what their traditions are about. Learn new ways of expressing whatever is inside of you. You can find out more about Robyn at interfaiththrougheducation.com. That's interfaith, THRU, education.com. And remember, you can always find out more at the nobodyguidetolife.com, or you can reach out to us on Twitter and Facebook at Nobody's View, or join the Facebook community Simple Spirituality. If you like what you hear on the podcast, please consider a review or a subscription. We'd really appreciate it. It really helps. Keep practicing and have a good week.